Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our November Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We live in interesting times. We read in the newspapers this morning, or pulled off our computer printers, a lot of interesting news today. A Leadership Institute graduate named Winsome Sears, who is a black female former Marine, was elected to the House of Delegates from Norfolk. On the other hand, the Republicans lost with a candidate for governor who happened not to be a Leadership Institute graduate, unlike the current incumbent who is a Leadership Institute graduate. I think, ladies and gentlemen, that there is some lesson there. So far this year, the Leadership Institute has trained 2,895 students in 111 different schools, and since our last Wake Up Club breakfast, the Leadership Institute has trained our 30,000th student cumulatively. We have placed thus far this year 98 job seekers through our employment placement program. And you have before you on this yellow sheet a list of the programs for the Leadership Institute, that is our school schedule. And I'd ask that you take a moment and review the calendar and consider attending one of our programs. Of course, if you think that you already know everything there is to know about how to win in the public policy process, then you shouldn't go to one of our schools because you are probably ineducable. It's my pleasure now to introduce Ruth Blessing for our invocation. Ruth, and she'll give the Pledge of Allegiance as well. Ruth is an intern here at the Leadership Institute and works as my intern with my assistant, Amy Green. Ruth is currently a senior at Bob Jones University. She's studying accounting, and upon completion of her internship, she plans to finish college and to pursue becoming a CPA. Ruth says she enjoys public speaking, and she's competed in speech and debate tournaments throughout high school and college, and she's been active in politics for many years. She's an avid reader of conservative literature, and she's a darn good intern. Ruth?
Would you please stand with me for the pledge and the prayer? Heavenly Father, we thank you for each person here this morning, and Lord, especially in these troubled times, we pray for our leaders, that you would give them the wisdom and the courage, especially the newly elected ones, Lord, that they need to be able to carry out the jobs that you've placed them in. Lord, I thank you for this food that was here this morning. I pray that you would bless it to the nourishment of our bodies. Bless Dr. Gramm as she speaks to us, Lord. Give her the words that she needs as she speaks. In Jesus' name, amen. Would you say the pledge with me, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
And now to give an update on activities relating to the Conservative Leadership Conference? What? Employment Placement Service. We're going to have Stephanie Netzer. Stephanie is currently the Institute Assistant Director of the Employment Placement Service. She's a native of La Crosse, Wisconsin. Stephanie graduated from the University of Wisconsin at La Crosse in '96 with a bachelor's degree in history and a minor in English. She completed an internship with the Berlin Ministry of Urban Development and Environmental Protection, where she worked for a conservative member of the German capital's government as a public relations assistant. In this capacity, she traveled through Germany, Austria, England, Ireland, and the United States. Not bad for a government job. Stephanie.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Leadership Institute myself. I am the Assistant Director of the Employment Placement Service, and here in Washington, D.C., think tanks and public policy organizations, along with Capitol Hill and now the executive branch, will continue to be major markets for the Employment Placement Service to attract conservatives for those markets. One year ago this month, LI, in cooperation with the Heritage Foundation and the Prosperity Caucus, conducted Capitol Hill Career Fair in the Cannon Caucus and the Cannon House Caucus Room, bringing in over 500 job seekers. By January of 2001, the number of screened and approved job seekers expanded from a yearly average of 100 to over 400 in the EPS files. And to this day, EPS continues to screen many new applicants every week on a continuing basis, precluding the need for another Capitol Hill Career Fair. However, through more economical and efficient mediums, EPS continues to focus on ways and means to increase awareness of the resources available here. Already, the LI website produces a large number of applicants who download our application and fax to us the necessary resume and supporting materials, reducing large postal expenses. Full electronic placement, soon to be realized by a combination of the database with the website, will enhance economy, productivity, and further expedite a quick response, which is the hallmark of EPS quality and service. In the very near future, the EPS page on the website will include application and resume forms that can be downloaded and returned electronically. Subsequently, the resume will be forwarded on the internet to the employer at no expense. This will enhance the mission of placing conservative leaders and activists throughout the country. On May 17, 2001, EPS initiated the first and very successful career training workshop with over 60 students. It's presented by EPS in cooperation with the Job Pod and Grover Norquist Conservative Caucus. J. Naylor Cope, Deputy Director of Personnel in the Bush 1 administration, an internationally recognized executive recruiter, conducted the training session. At this time, EPS is working with the Heritage Foundation to make the workshop a regular event on the LI program schedule. In this regard, EPS Director Jim Cromwell and I continue to emphasize hands-on policy, encouraging as many candidates to come in and personally meet with us to develop a job search strategy. We have been joined in this cycle by intern Kelly Garrettson, a student at Emory University in Florida, who is proving to be a valuable asset in our quality control approach in maintaining the database of over 5,000 members. One of the most coveted working tools for the conservative staff in Capitol Hill, the executive branch, and public policy organizations is Leadership Institute's original U.S. Congress Handbook, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. 7 pages at the beginning of the book are dedicated to the training schools and EPS services of the Leadership Institute. EPS makes the arrangements for the printing and delivery of the handbooks, members of Congress, to the White House and offices, and department secretaries, and the Attorney General, as well as conservative public policy officials. Personal thank you letters were received from President Bush, Department Secretaries Donald Rumsfeld, Colin Powell, Norman Mineta, and Anthony Principi, in addition to calls from other top officials in the departments and agencies. A year ago, EPS found jobs for over 700 conservatives. So far this year, we've expanded outreach. EPS has placed 98 conservatives in 83 different organizations, including 8 with the administration, which is one of my proudest achievements. I just want to say on this as a way of saying how wonderful it is to have the administration in touch with us. I have received thank you letters from Clay Johnson himself in regards to resumes that I've sent them, and it makes me very happy to see that we have a good relationship with the president and the administration, and that we can help them when they need help and getting good people to do good work for our country. We still have 2 months to go, and our goal is 100, and I believe we're going to far surpass it and far surpass last year's numbers. So, thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. To introduce our speaker, I'm going to present to you Victoria Frazier. Victoria is the controller here at the Leadership Institute. She earned a degree in accounting from the University of Houston and has nearly 20 years of experience in the business world, some of which was spent in South Africa working for Ernst & Young, a Big Five accounting firm. Victoria in Texas had a considerable experience in politics as a volunteer activist, and then having been a candidate for the State House of Representatives in Texas. And she also, demonstrating her commitment, was a member of the volunteer team who participated in the Miami vote recount in Florida last fall. Victoria Frazier.
As you know, we're here to hear Dr. Wendy Gramm. Dr. Gramm has a distinguished career in economics. She has been called the Margaret Thatcher of financial regulation. Dr. Gramm started her economic career at Texas A&M University, and as a Texan, I'm very proud of that. And don't believe what you hear about Aggies. We can count. They can. She met and married Senator Phil Gramm, and this marriage produced two fine sons, Marshall and Jeff. But I did want to tell you that it also appears that Dr. Gramm's strong economic background influenced her home life and her husband as well. And I wanted to share with you a comment Senator Phil Gramm made on the marriage penalty tax, which I'm sure Dr. Gramm, in her wise economic background, influenced. Responding to a Democratic idea, Senator Phil Gramm's comment was, "You're for love, and we're for marriage, and this bill will give us more of both." So thank you, Dr. Gramm, for all your hard work in the public arena, and many Texans are very grateful. Dr. Wendy Gramm.
It's always good to see good Texas faces up here. Thank you, Morton and Helen, and for all of you for what you do here at the Leadership Institute. And in case you wonder whether or not elections have consequences, do elections have consequences? A year ago, we didn't know who our president was going to be. 9 months ago, we didn't know who our president was going to be. But boy, it just seems like almost a lifetime away. And aren't you glad we have President Bush in office? And aren't we sad we're not going to have another Republican in the State House in Virginia, in Richmond? But elections do have consequences. And what is so important about the Leadership Institute, just let me give 1 minute of promotional here, free promotional. And that is that it is so important to develop young conservative talent, because power corrupts. I don't know what these folks are thinking about up there on the Hill, but the idea that we're going to get more airport security by making everybody a government worker just boggles my mind. If you stop and think about it, you know, arguably, we have a lot of problems, from the failure of intelligence, from the failure to keep people out who shouldn't be in, criminal elements out from our borders, to regulations that of course allowed box cutters on planes, right, but kept the rest of us from having something that could perhaps overpower some of these folks. But the fact of the matter is that one could argue that there were a lot of government failures involved with a terrorist attack. And yet here we are talking about making it more difficult to fire somebody if
we have a security breach at the airport. And we have a lot of normally quite reasonable folks on the Hill kind of taking a little bit of a leave from their senses in arguing vigorously for federalizing airport security. And so my point is that while many people believe they are for liberty, they believe they are good conservatives, good Republicans, whatever, when it gets down to kind of the nuts and bolts on an issue, they sometimes get swayed by the other side. The other side never forgets. Never forgets. So, one day after we had this terrible attack, everybody's in shock. And what's happening on the Hill? Teddy Kennedy, no, it must be 2 days because they weren't in session, but it was a couple days later then Kennedy wasn't trying to push through something that the unions wanted to further unionize, strengthen unions on the Hill. Nobody else was thinking about that, but was almost snuck through. Somebody said, wait a minute, and so someone was paying attention. My point being that getting people, young and not so young, and teaching them the leadership skills so that they are able to connect with the voters and so they can speak to voters with a consistent message or speak to the public and speak to the media is very, very valuable. Now I'm on a little bit of a different end of the business, and that is to try and provide information and in fact trying to teach people who might not already be there, all right, about some of the important factors about government and about regulations in particular. And it isn't so easy. But I'd also say that I'm not just doing that rather impossible task of trying to teach people who aren't with us. That's always good education for all of us, and it's a humbling experience. But also, I'm also trying to provide information to those who are out there on our side for them to use about regulations. For the last month, we've been really more focused on the attacks that we have coming from outside, external threats, from those who want to destroy our system and our civilization. But I've also been very concerned about the attacks from within, those who are always trying to advance the size and the reach of government and thereby reducing our freedoms. I love President Bush's OMB director, Office of Management and Budget Director, Mitch Daniels, who has said, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but he said basically that this bipartisanship is genuine, it's warm, and it's expensive. The other thing he said was that, as a budget director, he said, if you put the name of security on this bill, it'll pass, all right? And it'll cost you every agency and every legislator is kind of brushing off his old favorite program, his or her old favorite program, and the agencies are coming out with their favorite programs too, and they're brushing it off and they say, this is for security, all right? And getting it through some big program, new program. And so our liberties are at stake. We do have to watch for that. And people have made comments about it. People have said we've got to be careful about our liberties, because people, the American people, I think people in general, when we are threatened, when we are concerned, we tend to look to government or to some higher authority. For many, it's going to church. But unfortunately for many, it's turning to government and looking to see what government can do for us. And I used to almost say it as a joke that back when I first started government in the bowels of the Federal Trade Commission, when I was young and naive, we had a saying, one anecdote makes a regulation, two anecdotes make a law. Well, when you have something as horrifying as what happened on September 11th, you have lots and lots and lots of laws. And we have, over the years, with the help of the press, frankly, and with the help of many other people, whenever we've had something tragic or any kind of event happen, we've tended to kind of look to government to say, well, what are you going to do to prevent this from ever happening again? Some of you might remember the stock market crash of 1987, because I was in government at that time, and I was at the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and we had to actually go up to testify before Congress. And luckily, I got to testify with Alan Greenspan starting off. We were on a panel, and Alan Greenspan would actually say with a very straight face, and he had a lot of credibility even then, and he'd say, Mr. Chairman, we cannot promise you that the stock market will never go down again. I mean, this was serious testimony, but over the years, as we've done that and we've become almost kind of conditioned to it. The press, will tell you some terrible story that happened. Maybe sometimes it's in a very small town someplace, and something bad has happened to someone, and the Congress picks up on it, and then they come in to beat up on the agents and say, what are you going to do to prevent that from happening again? And why else do you see all these politicians going out to, disaster sites? When a tornado occurs and they come in and we say, they do go and they say, we're from government and we're going to help you. And my husband has said in going around Texas, even after September 11th, he says, so many people will come up to him and say, he's used to people coming up and saying, you're doing a great job. I mean, usually people don't come up to you and say you're doing a lousy job. So he's used to them saying you're doing a great job. But what's different this time is they're coming up and they're saying, you're doing a great job, and all of you up there are doing a wonderful job. All right? Now, mind you, they're not doing that much different than they've ever done. Maybe they're doing a little worse than some people's views. On the other hand, it's just, but again, there's this turning to government, and that is of great concern because you may think government is big, and government may be taking away your freedoms. And all you have to do is look at the size of the federal budget. And it's, way over $1 trillion. And you know that they are taking your money out of one pocket, and they're spending it for you. Rather than you deciding how you're going to spend your own money, they tax you, and then they spend it for you. All right, as if you didn't know how to spend it for yourself. And so when you have to pay the IRS every day how much freedom you're giving away and how much the government is really taking a bite out of you. But what many people don't realize is that bite is far worse than you think, and it's probably another 40 or 50% more that you're paying in taxes, but you don't know it. It's what I call the hidden tax, and it's a hidden tax of regulations. If you stop and think about it, a regulation tells you what to do, or it tells the state to make you do something, all right? Or make a business do something. And I remind people all the time, I say, when I taught economics back when I was teaching Aggies, I would tell them that businesses, corporations don't pay taxes, buildings don't pay taxes, people pay taxes. That burden, all right, falls on people. The same thing for these hidden taxes of regulations. States don't have mandates that are forced on them. Basically, people have to carry out these regulations. And regulations, after all, what's happened here is that some policymaker, whether or not it's somebody in an agency, okay, trying to protect your environment, your drinking water, trying to save you energy costs, all right? Somebody in an agency or maybe some policymaker either in Richmond or up in Washington, D.C. has decided that there is a valuable government program, whether or not it's saving endangered species or conserving energy, that is a public program, and rather than us taxing you, which is politically not so fun, all right, but rather than taxing you and paying for it, we'll just say you do it, all right? Instead of buying the property and saving an endangered species, we say you're going to save the endangered species by restricting what you can do on your property. All right? We're going to tell you how you're going to run your business, how you can or can't dig a ditch, all right, what your ladder is going, how your ladder is going to be manufactured, how your lawnmower has to cut off just so that in case you lift up your lawnmower to cut your hedge and it should fall and hurt you, true story, all right, that we're going to tell you how to make lawnmowers. This is a true story, Consumer Protection Safety Commission actually did a study about these, 5-gallon buckets, industrial buckets, it must be a 10-gallon industrial buckets, because terrible thing, they get filled with water, rainwater, and there were some, I don't know how many children, a couple of children who fell in them and drowned. And so they actually did a study to see if they couldn't, maybe see about designing those buckets differently so that they leaked. And now, when I tell the story, it's a true story. Now, they decided, partly because industry said, well, wait a minute, leaking buckets really is a problem when for us, all right? Now, when I would tell that story, a former commissioner of the CPSC came up and said, well, Wendy, we didn't actually pass that. We did not regulate. And what they did instead was they put a sticker on the bucket saying, watch your child. But the fact of the matter is they did spend, I don't know how many thousands of your dollars to conduct the study, which is, of course, common sense. But the fact of the matter is that, so these mandates, these regulations are a cost, and they're a hidden regulatory cost. We don't even know what they are. We don't even total up the total regulatory cost. The best estimate that we have is a study done by Tom Hopkins way back in 1980, which tried to estimate the total cost of regulations. And that study has recently been updated by both Tom Hopkins and a colleague, Mark Crane, at George Mason University in the economics department. It was done for the SBA, and the newest estimate for 2000 is that the total cost of regulations is $843 billion per year, B with a B, with a billion with a B, $843 billion a year, which adds another 40% or so. Now those, I believe, and they are surely great underestimates of the total cost of regulation. But they're conservative in their estimates. But that is the best estimate that we have. We have just, the Mercator Center, at our regulatory studies program, where we try to advance knowledge of regulations. You get out as much information about regulations as we can and talk about analyze regulations and the impact on the public. But we just finished a study of the cost of workplace regulations, just personnel kinds of regulations. And our conservative estimate, which is based on looking at a whole bunch of old academic studies and it's on the estimates and adding them all together and getting our best estimate, is somewhere around $91 billion per year that we spend just on human resource workplace regulations, and that's without ergonomics, which was proposed. This is a huge number, and what my objective is that over the next year and next years is to keep pounding home to people that you talk about the tax and the size of government, and we have a tax freedom from taxes day, a tax freedom day, all right, and we all demonstrate on April 15th about the IRS and what we have to pay. Well, we need to add something else every year, and that is a freedom from government day. Let's add the other extra, how many days we're working for the government, all right, and paying for these other regulations, that's a lot of which we don't even really agree with. I mean, if you stop and think about it, they are telling us how to build our mousetrap, who we can hire and fire, how we should raise our kids, how we should educate them. And government, of course, has not been the most, successful in all of these issues, or any of the issues. And also, if you stop and think about it, if government is telling you how to build that mousetrap, how are we ever going to find out and develop that better mousetrap? So there are some real costs here that are very difficult to measure and that are not in our estimates of the cost of regulation. I will just finish with a couple of stories, a few more anecdotes of the kinds of regulations that are out there being considered. A lot of these regulations were midnight regulations that the Clinton administration pushed through, all right? And a lot of them don't make sense. Some of my favorites, let's start with the silly and then go to the not so silly. The silly one is the one that I take personal umbrage over, and this is one where it's the washing machine regulations. The government has decided that we aren't conserving enough energy. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that our air conditioners and heat pumps and washing machines are more energy efficient. And with regard to washing machines, what these new standards would do is that it would make us all, require us, the only washing machines right now that meet these standards are these front-loading washing machines. All right? And here's the interesting part. Those washing machines are now available on the market. All right? These energy-efficient washing machines, but they cost about $200, $250 more than the other ones. So a lot of people don't buy those. So the washing machine guys they weren't against these regulations, all right? So the Department of Energy passed these regulations, and but here's the thing that I find troubling, and that is that you have to wash, oh gosh, it's 5.5, is it 5.5 or 7.5? I think it might be, well, you either have to wash 5.5 loads per week, every week of the year, for 15 years of the life of the washing machine. That's the break-even point, okay? If you wash more loads than that, you're going to save energy, and you'll make back the $250 that you spent. If you do less than that, you won't ever make back, save enough energy to make this energy efficient, all right? And, of course, who does this hurt? It hurts the poor, it hurts the elderly, all right? Rich folks will buy these. I mean, they're the ones that are buying them already right now, but not enough of them. Arsenic, you've heard about drinking arsenic. Do we want you to drink arsenic? No, but the fact of the matter is that this is a regulation that is based on bad science. There are some scientific studies out there of Peruvian and Taiwanese populations where their levels of arsenic are like on the order of magnitude, 10 times higher than what EPA is suggesting. All right, so and besides, those are poor populations with poor nutrition who have much higher smoking incidence than we do, and they found slightly higher rates of bladder cancer. However, there are two other studies of one or two other studies of U.S. populations, all right, with lower levels of arsenic, which is a naturally occurring substance. It leaches out of the rocks and into the groundwater, but at lower levels. And the U.S. study of the study of U.S. populations, guess what? Doesn't show effects. Well, EPA and their so-called science panel discounts or suppresses that other study, all right, that keeps pointing out these other Taiwanese study. I find it very troubling on two counts, not only because it's bad science, but secondly, the real issue arises, this is not a pollutant. Arsenic is not a pollutant. It is not something that was introduced to the air by some fault. This is a naturally occurring substance. It occurs locally. So question, what is EPA doing about this? All right? Local water officials, local municipalities, especially out west, have argued against this because it is very costly. And in this day and age, when they should be worried about protecting and spending their money, they have to make decisions every day about how to spend their money. They have to, whether or not they're buying health equipment, whether or not they're doing other things to safeguard their water supply, right? One thing they don't want to do out of New Mexico and Arizona, for example, they don't want to spend their money reducing the arsenic levels to very low levels when they feel like there isn't a health concern. So those are two. Another one that EPA went out with, this is a battle that we lost last year. We write these public interest comments representing the public interest and try to get the agency to do something. And then we also write some op-eds because we know sometimes the agencies won't do something. But this one regulation is called worst case scenarios. And what EPA required is requiring is they require chemical companies and other companies to write what is your worst case scenario if you had some huge eruption or leak or explosion at your plant. Write that worst case scenario, okay, and what the damage would be. Well, we fought last year, said this is not a good idea to just scare everybody unnecessarily, all right? EPA wanted them to put it, they wanted to put this information on their website. The FBI last year, okay, said, wait a minute, time out, guys. No, we don't want to do this. But, so what the FBI, Department of Justice, negotiated with EPA under the Clinton administration was actually not that. It was a middle ground, all right? The middle ground was that EPA put on its website some information, but it is really benign. It's not all that awful. But then EPA got their side in too, and what they said is that there are 10 reading rooms around the country where they put all this awful information in. But you have to have your ID, and you can't copy it. But you can go in and you can look at 10 places at a time, and you can take notes, all right? So if you're a terrorist, say, you know, you might not have your fake ID from someplace in Virginia, right? Another failure of a government thing, right? Giving out fake IDs, right? But you know what's happening is that environmental groups are going in and they're copying down the information, and then they're putting it on their websites. So this information is out. It always amazes me what kind of information we get out there. But at any rate, that's a regulation where, again, we lost a battle. Now, let me go back to what I started off with, that elections do have consequences, that we do have this ridiculous ergonomics regulation that would have been incredibly expensive. That if you had, for example, if we had had a blizzard today and you had been out shoveling snow, or perhaps you'd been playing tennis yesterday and got a little tennis elbow or something, but you sitting at your office would aggravate your elbow or your back or whatever, you know, if it exacerbates your problem, your place of work, your employer would have to remediate that, including letting you take off time from work to take care of your hurting back. It doesn't matter that the back was caused by something else. If sitting in a chair exacerbates it, for example, that you would have to put in a whole ergonomics program, you'd have to try and remediate it, including giving you time off with pay for work. Now, Congress rose up and said no, and actually used some new powers that they have to overturn that regulation, and we do have a terrific Department of Labor secretary and an OSHA director who understands regulations and their costs, and they are moving quite cautiously to relook at this new regulation. Meanwhile, within days after Congress said, thou shalt not pass this ergonomics regulation, there were members of Congress passing or proposing bills, a number of bills saying, you, Madam Chairman, Secretary of Labor, shall promulgate these regulations. So there you have it. We do have to be concerned about the freedoms that are being taken away every day from within. And, you know, Thomas Jefferson told us from the very beginning that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And we all know that he was talking about government, because government can take away our freedoms. And I want you to know that it always amazes me about how smart our founding fathers were. And indeed, we're still fighting those battles today. So thank you for your part in these battles for liberty. It is important, and it is important to stay ever more focused right now, today, as it was back 200 years ago. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Regulators, like bureaucrats, don't die, and they sure don't fade away either.
That's right.
Is there any way to regulate the regulators?
Well, you know, it's very interesting. We do have every year, which tells you something about the fact that Americans feel the burden of regulations implicitly. They know there's something wrong, and they know it's taking away the freedoms. So every year we have a reg reform initiative. And it is, it might be creating a congressional office of regulatory analysis so that you have Congress who can review regulations as well. They gave themselves powers to overturn regulations by a joint resolution of disapproval, which they have used since 1990. I think it's been in existence since 1995. They've used once to overturn ergonomics. All right, and part of that is because of they can overturn it, but the president can veto it. So ergonomics was perfect because that president was gone, and the incoming president wouldn't veto it. So it was appropriate use. But I think it's very difficult. All right, and what we have to do ultimately, and remember that these are bureaucrats who are not accountable. They'll dust off their proposals every few months or so. My old office that I ran in the White House is, waxes and wanes. Now under President Bush, it'll be a little bit more stronger than it was under Clinton, for example. But I think ultimately, the American people have to understand the cost of regulations, and they've got to bring pressure on both the executive branch and Congress to reduce the size and the scope of government. I mean, I think it gets down to that basic. We could always say, cut the size of government in half and make government agencies really focus on what's important. But it's the same thing. You have to have the people who understand it enough, who will basically get out in front and lead their members of Congress and the executive branch. So that's why I'm in the business I'm in. I was in government, and I had my own agency, tried to make long-term changes, and ultimately I am back in the business of halfway between academics and the policy world, trying to bring information to the policymakers, trying to build that knowledge base so that the American people can understand the cost of regulations, especially health, safety, the environment, social regulations. Just the way they understood the benefit of economic deregulation, we need them to understand other kinds of regulations as well. That's a long answer. Sorry about that. I'll try to be short on the next one. Yeah.
Is the new environment that we're in since September 11th, terrorism for America, going to increase the regulatory impulse that urge Washington?
Question is, the question, in case you didn't hear it, was the impact of September 11th on regulatory urges. And like the budget, all right, there'll be people who will want to regulate more, all right, federalize airport security, put more regulations, and arguably some would say we need to have more regulations in some areas. So yes, my instinct is that we got to be careful. Like Mitch Daniels, all these favorite programs for money and for regulations will come up dressed up as security measures, all right? But let me also say that with the president and key members of Congress so focused on certain issues of September 11th, it also means that the agencies will be more on their own. And I would point out that there have been some agencies who've done just what you've said and said, now let's focus on the important stuff, and then we should really be worried about the costs that we impose on the American business because we've got tough economic times and we need to conserve our resources. Harvey Pitt of the SEC and my old Commodity Futures Trading Commission is saying, look, this is a time when we want to make things easier on businesses. So with IPOs, for example, people trying to raise money, we should try and reduce the burdens on them. Okay? So there are a few. I think it depends on the agency. I think Elaine Chow at the Department of Labor has a strong team with her, and she will not use this period as an attempt to push through things. Okay? You will have some others. I mean, why are we dealing with arsenic in drinking water right now? There's no statutory deadline. There's no court case out there. Seems to me we should be thinking about something more important than that. It's not the health hazard that they say it is, and we should be worried. They should be worried more about what can be done to protect, our drinking water? Is there something, maybe it's better that they're not thinking that, but I'm sure they are someplace. Yes.
What about getting a regulation? They have a very good one in Germany that solves the problem of congestion on freeways. But we can't even reach the elected officials because every time I send any information to them, they turn it over to the Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation don't want any part of something that will give about a 50% downsizing in their expanding of highways, because the solution to the merging problem, as they have already done it in Germany, and anybody that's been there can tell you it really works on alternate yield. But every time I send anything to the senators or the governors or
They say-
rest, and now that this election has gotten rid of the Republican governor of Virginia, if there's any way to get to the governor the information that he can by executive order make a test like they have it already in Germany.
I would suggest on highway congestion, let me make a suggestion, because I understand your concern and not able to get to some decision makers. What you might try is, one, do what you're doing, try at the state level, but also there are a number, and I don't know what the group is in Virginia, but there are a number of state level think tanks, and they deal with state level issues, and issues of highway congestion, the use of light rail, and highway construction, etc., very often go to the state levels. And what I found is that these state level organizations, these state level think tanks, and look under state policy networks, they look at these transportation issues. So those are people who care about, and these are, again, nonprofit think tanks. And so I'll give you some more information on that later. They might be able to work, and these state level think tanks are often very well connected to their legislators in their states. Right? Yes?
How can Congress permanently restrain the ability of executive agencies to issue regulations? Is there a legislative fix?
How can Congress restrain agencies from issuing regulations? With difficulty. First of all, it's like first do no harm. Congress should put in themselves some restrictions on them. They often pass legislation that has a lot of regulatory power in them. My favorite proposal is to have, and all it takes is a few members of Congress, is to put in every law that they pass, all right? Just stick in a clause that says the costs to be imposed on state level, state, local, and the private sector, okay? The cost imposed by this law shall not exceed blank dollars. It's like an authorization. You have a budget authorization. You have a regulatory authorization. Shall not exceed blank $1 million. Then they have to debate it. And here's the issue. The agency who wants this bill doesn't have the incentive to either lowball or highball it, because if they go over, they have to come back for more authorizations. But if they put a huge number in, people are going to balk at it. So at least it makes the legislators, congressmen, focus on this. And then every time they write a regulation, they have to certify that this regulation costs this much and uses this much of this budget allocation, this regulatory budget allocation. All right? And then have somebody else do retrospectives to see what did it really cost. In other words, when we start treating regulations like we treat the fiscal budget, all right, I think what will happen is the American people will start paying attention. Congress will start paying attention because they have to. So that's kind of what we're doing at the Mercator Center, Okay, we're trying to get people to understand that regulations are taxes, and to start treating them, if you treat it like the budget. We only got control of the budget when we had a huge budget deficit that the American people started to get nervous about. My view is that we're going to start, we won't win the debate perhaps, but we'll at least make a little headway in the debate when we start treating regulations like the budget and the American people start getting upset, just as they got upset about the size of the budget now. That's what caused them to make, this is why the Democrats run like Republicans, guys. All right? They're all of a sudden these big budget hawks, deficit hawks. Now, mind you, they want to raise taxes, but it's hard to raise taxes. Well, if we start treating regulations like that, then that's my hope. Okay, so create a red budget. Yes?
Hey, you mentioned Consumer Product Safety Commission.
Oh, yes, my
Can
God.
anything be done about, since we are recently a renegade agency?
Oh, actually, it's been quite good relative to a lot of other agencies. No.
And Brown, as
How to get rid of agencies? Is that your question?
how do you get a hold of,
Get control of it?
get rid of Ann Brown and get a sandbag, which is first appointee, and she seems to just have an indefinite control.
I think there's another appointee going up, is what I understand. It really was terrible what they did to this sweet lady who I got to know in the early Reagan years, Sheila Gall, working on some adoption task force issues, you know, and she's shy and sweet, and so they just pilloried her. Hillary did. But this is a Consumer Product Safety Commission. Well, what can you do about it? Basically what Reagan did was, the reason why I ended up heading up a regulatory agency was that the philosophy of the personnel people is to put your most hardcore folks out in the agencies, the most anti-regulation people out in these regulatory agencies, because you are basically, you're sort of a step removed from the administration, and you have a term appointment, so they can't fire you.
Can they get a person like that confirmed?
Yeah, they should be able to. You know, and but again, to do that, the president has to, you know, say, this is a person I want, and I'm going to go fight for that person. You know, finding those kinds of people, I think, are hard, which is why this talent, what you're doing here, is really important. Because I know that people out in the agencies are looking for people who will be part of their team, who want to do the things they want to do, who want to do the things that this president wants to do, and that is to, you know, to be rational, to have common sense. But go ahead. Is there a question? One more question.
Wow. One small little thing. You mentioned the guards. I work at the FAA. We fired 7 building guards since September 9th. And if they were federal employees,
You could fire them
we would
too.
have sent them to be retrained, I'm sure.
Good. That is good to know. That makes me feel better, because as head of an agency, it was very difficult. And, you know, it was always dealing with a union that gave us the problem. And it was,
That's why we have private guards. We fired 7 of them, but if they were federal employees,
Oh.
we would have never gotten rid of them.
I thought you were making the counterpoint, I thought he was making the counterpoint saying you were in government and you did fire them. I'm saying, boy, you were better than I could do. But yeah, that's right. Here again, you're making the same point I did. You can fire them. It's hard to fire people if they're working for the government. And furthermore, you know, look, Reagan, remember he had to fire all of the air traffic controllers, right? Because of the difficulty. Anyway, thank you, Morton.
Thank you. Well, Wendy, you started me thinking, if babies, children can drown in these 5-gallon plastic buckets that fall off of trucks on the highway, we all see them from time to time, clearly more babies will be drowning in bathtubs. Many more babies have to be drowning in bathtubs than are drowning in these plastic buckets. Therefore, we should do away with bathtubs. I mean, we could do that. We could do that. Of course, that would force everybody to take showers. On the other hand, everybody knows that if you're standing in a shower stall with soap and water, people are likely to fall down and be injured with that. So we need to outlaw showers. Now, it's always dangerous to make modest proposals like this because somebody may come along and actually act on these suggestions, which gives us all an opportunity to make money by investing in stocks of deodorant companies. Thank you so much. You are doing wonderful work at Mercatus and in your entire career. And I had a conversation not long ago with Senator Phil Gramm and asked him why on earth he is leaving the United States Senate. And what he said was that he says, well, I'm at my peak now, and I want to leave at my peak, and I have time in my life maybe for one more career. And I said, but I can understand why Senator Helms, whom I dearly love, who is now in bad health, and after 30 years he is retiring. But I said, you're at your peak now. Think about this, Phil. Phil Gramm, at 95% of his peak, is still going to be a great asset to our country. And I think that you're being a little selfish leaving as you are here. But the one thing that I hope is that we will still have you very active in the public policy process after Phil retires. I don't know where your plans are. I know how much you all love Texas, but we hope that you're going to be still fully active and in the battle, because you are a great treasure. And as a little token of our appreciation, I want to present to you one of our Adam Smith scars.
Thank you. Oh, it's great. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to invite you to join us next month, Wednesday, December 5th. Our special guest will be Mr. Gaylord Swim. Gaylord Swim is a brilliant fellow who has thought long and hard about the constitutional framework of the United States and how the wisdom of the Founding Fathers can better be brought to bear in our current circumstances. I've invited him because I have read material that he has produced. He lives out west. He's coming in for this for giving his remarks a month from now, and I assure you, you're going to find what he has to say of great interest. Those guests who would like a tour of the building should meet with Eric Putman at the podium here as we adjourn. Here's Eric. Raise your hand in case you all don't know Eric. Eric will be happy to give you the full tour of the building, and it's nice enough if you talk sweet to Eric, he'll take you up and even show you the deck up top, which is there's some pretty fall foliage to be viewed, strangely enough, even in Arlington, Virginia, from the deck of our building right now. It's very pretty. And he'll depart immediately after here for a tour. Thank you all very much for coming this morning.